Every 9 minutes, a child becomes a victim of abuse in America. Behind closed doors, away from watchful eyes, over 700,000 children suffer yearly at the hands of those meant to protect them. The most devastating truth? In 91% of cases, the perpetrator is someone the child knows and trusts. Have you ever wondered what happens when the person sworn to uphold the law becomes the victim of its most heinous violation? What choices would you make if the sanctuary of your home became the scene of an unthinkable betrayal? In the humid heart of Florida, Sheriff Lila Hartman commanded respect. For 15 years, her badge represented justice in Cypress County. Citizens slept peacefully knowing she patrolled their streets. Fellow officers looked to her unwavering leadership during crises. Her decorated career built a reputation of integrity that seemed unshakable. But on July 17, 2019, Sheriff Hartman returned home early from her shift. What she discovered in her living room violated every oath she'd sworn, both as an officer and as a mother. The confrontation that followed left blood on hardwood floors, a family destroyed, and a community questioning everything they thought they knew about the people who protect them. "I never thought I'd have to choose between my badge and my child," Lila would later confess from behind the visitor's glass. But when that moment comes, you don't think. You just act. This isn't just another crime story. This is about the impossible choices faced when evil infiltrates your own home. When the person you trusted with your life and your child's life becomes the monster you've spent your career fighting against. Tonight, we expose the warning signs everyone missed, the psychological manipulation that went unchecked for years, and the violent breaking point that transformed a respected sheriff into something she never imagined becoming. If stories of justice, betrayal, and the human capacity for both protection and destruction fascinate you, hit subscribe now and join our true crime village. Leave a comment below sharing what you would have done in Sheriff Hartman's position. The conversation happening in our community might just help someone recognize the danger signs in their own home before tragedy strikes. This is the story of how a Florida sheriff's marriage ended in bloody tragedy after discovering her husband with their child. In Cypress County, Sheriff Lila Hartman's name carried weight, not from intimidation but earned respect. At community meetings, her steady voice calmed anxious residents. During hurricane season, her decisive leadership saved countless lives. Each morning at the station, deputies received clear direction from a woman whose focus never wavered. "She ran that department like a Swiss watch," recalled Deputy Carlos Rivera. "Every procedure had purpose, every decision backed by principle." Nobody questioned her judgment, not once in 15 years. The community saw her as their protector, the embodiment of justice. Mothers felt safer knowing she patrolled their streets. Children waved when her cruiser passed their schools. Local papers featured her accomplishments regularly. Drug busts, missing persons found, domestic violence rates dropping under her watch. Meanwhile, at home, her husband Daniel crafted his own public identity. Daniel Hartman once stood before classrooms of admiring students at Cypress High. His literature lessons ignited passion in even the most disinterested teens. Parent-teacher conferences ended with handshakes and gratitude. His classroom walls displayed student achievements like trophies. When budget cuts eliminated his position, the transition seemed logical, even admirable. Daniel would stay home with their daughter while Lila continued her career. Community members praised their modern arrangement. The Hartmans appeared to be adapting beautifully, but appearances deceive. Behind closed doors, Daniel's enthusiasm for teaching transformed into resentment. Books gathered dust. Lesson plans became grocery lists. The vibrant educator faded into shadow. He stopped showing up to community events, remembered Patricia Wells, PDA president. When he did appear, he seemed hollow, like watching someone perform a role they'd long forgotten. Neighbors noticed his car missing during school hours. Phone calls during dinner pulled him into hushed conversations. Explanations grew increasingly vague. When questioned, his charm resurfaced temporarily, just enough to deflect concern. At the center of this changing dynamic stood 12-year-old Mia, bright-eyed with her mother's determination and her father's creative spirit. Her artwork decorated the refrigerator, her academic awards lined the mantel. To the community, she represented the perfect blend of her parents' best qualities. Mia became Daniel's primary responsibility, his constant companion. Their previously appropriate father-daughter outings extended into unexplained absences. Her previously outgoing personality slowly withdrew. Teachers noted declining grades but attributed them to adolescent adjustment. When friends stopped receiving invitations to the Hartman home, few questioned why. What secrets would your neighbors discover if they could see through your walls? How many perfect families on your street might be crumbling behind drawn curtains? The truth is, we rarely recognize danger until it's too late. We accept explanations that comfort us rather than confront realities that disturb us. For Lila Hartman, focused on protecting her community, the threats gathering within her own home remained invisible, until they became impossible to ignore. Mrs. Evelyn Carter, 78, had lived on Palmetto Lane for 5 decades. Her front porch offered a perfect view of the Hartman household. From her wicker chair, she noted the changing patterns. Daniel's car missing during school hours, unfamiliar vehicles parked briefly at odd times, hushed arguments drifting through open windows on humid evenings. That young lady kept stopping by, Mrs. Carter later told investigators. Not much older than a college student. Always when Lila worked late shifts. The elderly woman had mentioned these visits to Sheriff Hartman twice, but her concerns were politely dismissed. At the Cypress Diner, whispers circulated among locals who noticed Daniel's increasingly erratic behavior. The once charismatic teacher now avoided eye contact during conversations. His explanations for missed community functions grew contradictory. His attentiveness toward Mia, initially admired, began raising uncomfortable questions. Something felt wrong about how he isolated that child, said waitress Jenny Martinez. They'd sit in the back booth for hours, him whispering, her looking down at her plate. When anyone approached, he'd stop mid-sentence. At the sheriff's department, Lila's professional instincts battled personal denial. The same investigative skills that made her exceptional at her job began registering discrepancies at home. Money disappeared from their joint account without explanation. Daniel's phone remained password protected, always placed face down. His stories about daily activities contained inconsistencies a trained officer couldn't ignore. I found receipts from places he claimed never to visit, Lila confided to Deputy Rivera. When questioned, his anger seemed disproportionate, defensive in ways that reminded me of perpetrators, not victims. Her law enforcement training recognized the signs of deception, yet acknowledging these patterns meant confronting possibilities too painful to consider. At Cypress Middle School, teachers documented subtle shifts in Mia's demeanor. The once confident student now flinched at sudden movements. Her participation dropped dramatically. Creative writing assignments that once showcased her imagination now featured themes of isolation and betrayal. She wore long sleeves even during phys ed in September heat, recalled counselor Dr. Winters. When I asked about home life, she'd recite responses that sounded rehearsed rather than genuine. Her circle of friends dwindled as invitations were repeatedly declined. Birthday parties went unattended. The vibrant child captured in previous yearbook photos faded into a withdrawn shadow, avoiding the camera altogether. For Sheriff Hartman, these warning signals competed with professional demands that drained her mental resources. Days spent confronting countywide crises left little energy for processing domestic concerns. Nights investigating domestic violence cases created a cruel irony. Her trained eye identified abuse in strangers' homes while missing critical signs within her own walls. The psychological toll accumulated silently. Sleep became elusive. Migraines intensified. Her legendary focus wavered during critical operations. The mental compartmentalization that once protected her now prevented her from connecting dangerous dots. Law enforcement officers experienced twice the rate of domestic problems as the general population, explained Dr. Raymond Chin, psychologist specializing in first responder trauma. The hypervigilance required for their job often creates blind spots at home. Have you noticed behavioral changes in someone you love that others dismissed? Those moments when your instincts screamed danger while everyone else saw normalcy. Share your experiences in the comments below. What warning signs did you recognize that others missed? Your insight might help someone else identify a relationship fracturing before tragedy strikes. July 17th began like any other summer day for Sheriff Hartman. Cypress County buzzed with routine complaints, noise violations, minor traffic incidents, a shoplifting case at the local market. By mid-afternoon, the station handled a community disturbance that resolved quicker than anticipated. "Take the evening, Sheriff," Deputy Rivera suggested, noting her exhaustion from consecutive double shifts. "We've got this covered." The opportunity to surprise her family with an early return tempted her. Perhaps dinner together might bridge the growing distance. Her cruiser pulled into the driveway at 7:43 p.m., 3 hours before her expected arrival. The Hartman residence stood oddly still. No kitchen lights, no dinner preparation sounds, no television murmur from the living room. Only Daniel's car sat in the driveway. Lila used her key quietly, attributing the unusual silence to Mia possibly finishing homework. Inside, the entryway remained dark. A half-empty wine glass sat on the counter beside Daniel's phone, notifications illuminating with messages from unknown numbers. The house felt wrong in ways her law enforcement instincts recognized immediately, the atmosphere charged with hidden activity. Muffled voices drifted from down the hallway. Lila moved silently, her training kicking in as she approached the partially open door to the den. The voices clarified, Daniel's hushed tone and what sounded disturbingly like Mia's suppressed crying. What she witnessed through that 3-inch opening demolished her world in a single moment. Daniel sat with Mia on the leather couch, his position unmistakably inappropriate. His hand reached places no father should touch, his whispers offering horrific reassurances. The child's tear-streaked face reflected confusion and fear, emotions no parent could witness without devastating consequence. In that crystallized second, Sheriff Hartman's brain processed the scene through dual channels. The law enforcement officer cataloged evidence of criminal behavior. Simultaneously, the mother experienced primal rage unlike anything in 15 years of police work. The human brain processes trauma uniquely, explained forensic psychologist Dr. Eleanor Maxwell. For someone with law enforcement training, the conflict between professional protocol and parental protection creates a neurological storm. Lila's pupils dilated. Her heart rate spiked from 72 to approximately 140 beats per minute. Blood rushed from her digestive system to her major muscle groups. Her prefrontal cortex, responsible for rational thought, temporarily yielded to her amygdala, controller of survival responses. Fight or flight response doesn't adequately describe what parents experience when their child faces threat, Dr. Maxwell continued. The intensity multiplies exponentially when the danger comes from someone trusted. The door slammed against the wall as Lila burst into the room. Daniel jumped back, expression shifting from shock to calculated manipulation. Mia froze, caught between terror and relief at her mother's appearance. "What are you doing home?" Daniel asked, his tone suggesting Lila was the intruder. His casual dismissal of the situation, attempting to normalize the abnormal, ignited 15 years of witnessed injustices in Lila's mind. Every domestic violence scene, every child abuse case, every victim who arrived too late for help condensed into this single moment. "Get away from her," Lila commanded, her voice unfamiliar even to herself. Daniel stood slowly, positioning himself between mother and daughter. "You're overreacting," he said calmly, employing the gaslighting techniques he'd refined over years. "This isn't what you think." His practiced denial reflected the calculated methodology of long-term abusers, minimizing behavior, shifting blame, manipulating perception. Each word confirmed the systematic nature of his betrayal. Mia remained motionless, displaying the frozen response common in ongoing abuse victims. Her eyes sought her mother's with a desperate plea that transcended words. "How long?" Lila demanded, hand moving instinctively toward her service weapon. When parents speak of doing anything to protect their children, most never face the brutal reality of that promise. What boundaries would you cross to save your child? What parts of yourself would you sacrifice? If you discovered someone you loved violating your child's trust in the most fundamental way, would your actions reflect the law you respect, or the deeper, primal code written into parental DNA? You need to calm down and listen, Daniel said, his voice eerily controlled as he stepped forward. This family has certain dynamics you've been too busy to understand. Lila positioned herself between Daniel and Mia, maternal instinct overriding professional training. Mia, go to Mrs. Carter's house right now, she commanded without taking her eyes off Daniel. She's not going anywhere, Daniel countered, blocking the doorway. We're going to discuss this like adults. Mia remained frozen, trapped in the psychological paralysis common to abuse victims. Her father's authority had been absolute during Lila's frequent absences. The power dynamic, established over months of manipulation, didn't dissolve instantly with her mother's arrival. Move away from the door, Lila demanded, her voice dropping to the dangerous calm her deputies recognized as her final warning. Daniel's facade cracked slightly. You don't understand what's happening in your own home, he hissed. While you're out playing hero, I've been the one raising her. We have a special bond you wouldn't comprehend. His attempt to normalize the abuse, a common tactic among perpetrators, ignited something primal in Lila. 15 years of training couldn't suppress the rage building behind her professional demeanor. Special bond? She repeated, each syllable sharp as broken glass. You're describing criminal behavior, nothing more. Daniel's expression darkened. You've neglected this family for years, he accused, switching to victim stance. Your precious career always came first. I gave up everything for you. He stepped toward her, miscalculating the threat she represented. When his hand reached out to grab her arm, a controlling gesture he'd employed successfully in previous arguments, the physical contact breached her last restraint. Lila's reaction came from muscle memory, a defensive maneuver taught in academy training. Her arm deflected his grasp, her body pivoted, and her open palm struck his sternum with calculated force. Daniel stumbled backward, genuine surprise replacing his manipulative mask. You dare touch me? He snarled, abandoning pretense entirely. The charming teacher persona vanished, revealing something cold and unfamiliar. You have no idea what I'm capable of. He lunged forward, no longer calculating consequences. The collision sent both adults crashing into the bookshelf. Glass shattered. Family photos crashed to the floor, frames splintering, symbolic destruction of their fabricated happiness. Mia screamed, the sound breaking her traumatized silence. Daniel, Sheriff Schute's husband. Tragedy strikes law enforcement family. Child abuse allegations surface after fatal shooting. Community reels as details emerge in Hartman case. Cypress County fractured into camps within hours. Outside the police station, supporters gathered with handmade signs. We stand with Sheriff Hartman. Across town at the community center, Daniel's former colleagues demanded justice for Daniel. The division cut through neighborhoods, churches, and businesses. People chose sides without knowing facts, recalled Pastor Williams of First Baptist Church. Some couldn't reconcile the dedicated sheriff with this violent act. Others couldn't imagine her taking such drastic measures without just cause. Social media exploded with opinions. Former students defended Daniel's character while parents of Mia's classmates expressed horror at the emerging allegations. Local news outlets struggled to maintain objectivity as fragments of information leaked from various sources. Inside the department, protocol demanded an impartial investigation despite personal loyalties. State authorities assumed jurisdiction to prevent conflicts of interest. Sheriff Hartman, now simply Lila, surrendered her badge and weapon to investigators who had once served under her command. The formal process proceeded with clinical precision. Crime scene technicians photographed blood spatter patterns and collected residue samples. Medical examiners documented the single gunshot wound to Daniel's chest. Forensic specialists analyzed the weapon's position and trajectory. Most devastating were Mia's interviews with child psychologists, revealing a pattern of abuse spanning months. Her recorded testimony, haltingly delivered in a sterile interview room. Provided the timeline investigators needed to understand the complete picture. The evidence tells a story beyond the shooting itself, explained State Investigator Wilson. Our job was to document not just what happened that night, but the circumstances leading to such an explosive conclusion. Throughout the investigation, Deputy Carlos Rivera maintained unwavering support for his former superior. While department policy prohibited official contact during ongoing investigations, he visited Lila during personal hours, bringing home-cooked meals from his mother and updates about the community. She saved countless lives during her career, Rivera told reporters. She deserves the presumption that her actions, however tragic, came from a place of protection, not malice. His advocacy extended beyond personal visits. Rivera organized fellow officers to establish a legal defense fund. He fielded media inquiries, redirecting harmful speculation toward the broader issue of child protection. His loyalty provided rare stability in Lila's shattered world. For Mia, the aftermath brought different challenges. Placed in temporary foster care pending investigation outcomes, she entered intensive therapy to address complex trauma. The bright 12-year-old now navigated a reality where both parents were effectively lost. One to death, one to legal consequences. Children in these situations experience compound trauma, explained Dr. Samantha Reed, child psychologist. They're processing not only the abuse itself but also the violent resolution and subsequent family dissolution. In sterile visiting rooms, mother and daughter attempted to rebuild their relationship through supervised interactions. Their conversations, monitored by court-appointed observers, revealed both the damage done and the resilience forming within their fractured bond. When systems fail to protect the vulnerable, communities must decide how to respond. Does your community have adequate resources for child abuse victims? Do local law enforcement officers receive proper training to identify domestic warning signs? Share your thoughts in the comments below on how communities should better support victims of family violence. What resources do you believe might have changed the outcome for the Hartman family? Your insights could help shape support systems that prevent similar tragedies. The state of Florida versus Lila Hartman began 9 months after the shooting. The Limestone Courthouse, normally hosting routine cases, now contained a drama that transcended typical legal proceedings. National media crowded limited seating as prosecutors announced charges. Second-degree murder with alternative counts of manslaughter. Defense attorney Margaret Chin built her case on 2 foundations: self-defense and protection of a minor. Mrs. Hartman responded as any parent would when discovering ongoing abuse, Chan argued in opening statements. The state must consider whether any reasonable person in her position would have reacted differently. Prosecutors countered with Lila's law enforcement training. She knew proper protocols for suspected abuse. Her position demanded she call for backup rather than take matters into her own hands. The trial exposed deeper questions about justice itself. When legal procedures fail to protect the most vulnerable, where does responsibility lie? When systems move too slowly for immediate threats, who bears the burden of action? As courtroom drama unfolded, the Cypress County Sheriff's Department implemented mandatory mental health screenings. Officers reluctantly entered sessions with Dr. Maxwell, confronting uncomfortable parallels between Lila's situation and their own home lives. Law enforcement suicide rates exceed the general population by 54%, Dr. Maxwell explained during department-wide training. The psychological weight of constant vigilance creates blind spots in personal assessment. Deputies discussed warning signs they'd missed in their former sheriff: increased irritability, declining concentration, subtle withdrawal from social engagement. These conversations expanded into examining their own mental health needs and home dynamics. Lila's case forced us to acknowledge our humanity, admitted Deputy Rivera. We spend careers believing we're different, immune to the vulnerabilities we witness daily. Her tragedy shattered that illusion. For Cypress County residents, reconciling Lila's dual identity proved challenging. The respected sheriff who coached Little League and coordinated hurricane evacuations now stood trial for killing her husband. The protector had become an avenger, her actions understandable yet disturbing. She upheld our laws for 15 years, argued retired Judge Thomas Wilson at a community forum, then broke them in one moment of crisis. Both realities exist simultaneously. Others questioned whether true justice remained possible. The system failed twice, suggested Pastor Williams. First by missing Daniel's abuse, then by punishing Lila's response to that failure. Local schools implemented new abuse recognition programs. The department established improved protocols for officer family wellness checks. Churches hosted healing circles for community members processing complex emotions around betrayal and violence. If our justice system requires emotional detachment, yet the most vulnerable victims need passionate advocacy, who truly serves justice? When legal consequences punish protective instincts, have we created a system that protects process over people? What does justice actually look like in cases where family violence destroys all possible happy endings? The jury deliberated for 38 hours before delivering their verdict. Not guilty of murder, guilty of voluntary manslaughter. Lila Hartman received a 5-year sentence with possibility of parole after 2 years, a resolution that satisfied neither supporters nor critics. Today, Mia lives with her maternal grandparents, attending weekly therapy sessions. Lila serves her sentence at Broward Correctional Facility, where she mentors inmates with histories of domestic violence. The Hartman house stands empty, a silent reminder of dangers hidden behind normal appearances. This tragedy highlights critical gaps in our protective systems. Warning signs appeared months before that fatal night. Daniel's increasing isolation of Mia, unexplained absences, behavioral changes in both father and daughter. Each red flag, viewed individually, seemed insufficient for action. Together, they formed a pattern visible only in hindsight. Protection requires vigilance beyond professional settings. For law enforcement families especially, the pressure to maintain perfect appearances can mask devastating realities. Recognizing these dynamics might have altered the Hartman family's fate. If you suspect child abuse, contact the National Child Abuse Hotline, 1-800-4A, Child 1-800-422-4453. For domestic violence situations, the National Domestic Violence Hotline provides 24/7 support. 1-800-799-SAFE 1-800-799-7233. Law enforcement officers facing personal crisis can reach confidential support through Copline at 1-800-267-5463, staffed by retired officers trained in P.